The mud of Etruria does not just coat your boots, it swallows them. The date is June 21st, 217, before the Common Era. You are a Roman legionary, and you have been marching since before dawn. The air is unnaturally cold for the middle of summer. A thick, white fog blankets the narrow shoreline of Lake Trasimene. It is so dense that you cannot see the man standing 3 feet to your left. But you can hear him. You can hear the clinking of iron, the squelch of leather, the ragged breathing of 30,000 men trying to move in perfect silence. You grip your wooden shield. Your knuckles are white. You are looking straight ahead, waiting for the sun to burn through the mist. But the sun never comes. Instead, the fog begins to smell like wood smoke. And then you hear the horn. Not one horn, hundreds of them, blaring from the hills above you, from the water beside you, and from the narrow pass behind you. You realize, with a sudden freezing drop in your stomach, that the fog around you is not weather. It is a wall of hidden enemies. And you have already marched past the exit. This is not a battle. This is not a clash of equals. This is an execution. Welcome to the Battle of Lake Trasimene, the day the Roman Republic walked blindly into a slaughter, and the environment itself became the ultimate weapon. To understand how 30,000 of Rome's finest soldiers were erased in a single morning, we have to look away from the battlefield and look at the men who sent them there. The Roman Senate is in a state of absolute panic. Just months earlier, the Carthaginian general Hannibal Barca did the impossible. He marched his army, complete with war elephants, over the frozen, treacherous passes of the Alps. He dropped into northern Italy like a meteor, shattering the Roman defenses at the Battle of the Trebia. Now, Hannibal is marching south, burning farms, inciting Gallic tribes to rebel, and daring Rome to stop him. Rome responds the only way it knows how. They raise new legions and appoint a new consul, Gaius Flaminius. Flaminius is a populist. He is a man of the people, fiercely aggressive, and completely devoid of patience. He despises the cautious, delaying tactics favored by the older senators. He believes that the only way to deal with Hannibal is to find him and crush him in a single, decisive blow. So, Flaminius marches his army south, desperate to intercept the Carthaginians before they can reach the capital. But Hannibal is a master of psychological warfare. He knows Flaminius is arrogant. He knows the Roman consul is impatient, and he knows exactly where to set the trap. He chooses the shores of Lake Trasimene. If you look at a modern topographical map of the area, the geography is terrifyingly obvious. The lake is a long, narrow body of water, bordered on the north by steep, heavily wooded hills. The hills rise sharply, choked with dense olive groves and thick Mediterranean scrub. The water is deep and dark, offering no escape to the south. There is only one viable route for a large army to pass along the shoreline. It is a narrow defile, a tight corridor of flat land, barely wide enough for a marching column, sandwiched between the steep slopes and the deep water. It is a geographical bottleneck, and Hannibal arrives there a day before the Romans. He does not just set up camp, he weaponizes the landscape. He studies the terrain with the cold, calculating eye of a predator. He positions his heavy Spanish and African infantry at the narrow eastern exit of the pass, blocking the way out. He hides his Gallic cavalry at the western entrance, sealing the door behind the Romans, and he scatters his light infantry and archers up into the dense forests on the steep hills overlooking the narrow path. But Hannibal knows that a hidden army is useless if the enemy sees them coming. He needs a screen. He needs to blind the Romans, and for that he turns to the weather. The night before the battle, the air is damp and still. Hannibal issues a highly specific, chilling order to his engineers. He tells them to gather massive amounts of green wood, damp leaves, and wet brush. He orders them to build hundreds of small fires along the ridges above the pass. But they are not to let the fires burn clean. They must smother the flames, forcing them to produce thick, heavy, white smoke. As the cold night air settles over the lake, the natural morning fog begins to mix with the artificial smoke from the Carthaginian fires. The result is a dense, impenetrable wall of white mist that sinks down into the valley, completely obscuring the hills. But there is a complication. A Carthaginian lieutenant, a veteran commander named Hannibal, rides up to Hannibal's command post as the fires are being lit. He points to the leaves on the trees, which are gently rustling. He tells Hannibal that the wind is blowing from the east, pushing the fog toward the western entrance of the pass. Hannibal warns that if the wind shifts during the night, the fog will blow backward, directly into the faces of the Carthaginian troops waiting on the hills, blinding them instead of the Romans. It is a valid tactical concern. If the Carthaginians cannot see, the trap fails. Hannibal looks at the rustling leaves, then looks out over the dark water of the lake. He smiles. He tells Hannibal that the wind will not shift. But even if it does not matter. The Romans are marching from the west to the east. If the wind blows from the east, the fog will be pushed directly into the faces of the advancing Roman army. They will be marching blind. Hannibal nods, understanding the grim logic, and rides off to prepare his cavalry. The trap is set. If you want to see more breakdowns of how geography decides the fate of empires, hit the subscribe button right now. We drop new tactical histories every single week, and you do not want to miss what we have coming up next. Dawn breaks, but you would never know it. The sun is completely choked out by the massive cloud of fog and smoke hanging over the valley. At the western end of the lake, the Roman army begins to move. Gaius Flaminius rides at the front, flanked by his lictors and his personal guard. He is confident. He believes he is hunting a cornered animal. He orders the army to advance in their standard manipular formation. This is the tactical genius of the Roman legions. Instead of a solid, rigid block of men, the Roman army is divided into small, flexible units called maniples. The hastati, the young men in the front lines, carry two heavy javelins called pila. The princeps, the seasoned veterans in the second line, wield the deadly gladius hispaniensis, a short sword designed for thrusting in tight quarters. The triarii, the oldest and most experienced soldiers, wait in the rear with their long spears. It is a system built on discipline, rotation, and mutual support. They deploy in a checkerboard pattern with gaps between the units to allow for movement. It is a brilliant system for an open field. But as the Roman vanguard enters the narrow pass at Sanguineto, the geometry of the trap begins to assert itself. The fog is incredibly thick. It is a physical weight pressing against your lungs, stinging your eyes. The visibility drops to less than 10 yards. You can feel the damp cold seeping through your wool tunic. Your sandals slip on the wet stones near the water's edge. The man in front of you stumbles, and for a second, the entire column halts. A centurion barks an order, his voice muffled by the heavy air. You adjust your grip on your pilum. The heavy iron tip points up into the white void. You wonder if the scouts were right. You wonder if Hannibal is really just a few miles ahead, trapped against the water. But the silence from the hills feels wrong. It feels heavy. The manipular formation immediately begins to break down. The centurions cannot see their standards. The tribunes cannot see the flanks. The army stretches out into a long, thin, blind column, marching along the narrow strip of land between the hills and the water. They are walking into the kill zone. In military terminology, A kill zone is the exact area where all intersecting lines of fire converge. It is the point of no return, and the Romans are marching directly into the center of it. For hours they march. The silence is agonizing. The only sounds are the marching boots and the lapping of the lake water. The soldiers are exhausted, tense, and completely blind. They do not notice that the ground is sloping slightly upward. They do not notice that the hills on their left are no longer empty. They do not notice that the narrow pass behind them has been quietly sealed by the Gallic cavalry. The trap is fully closed, and then the horn blows. It starts as a low, guttural blast from the hills above. Then another horn answers from the right, then another from the rear. Within seconds, the air is torn by the deafening roar of Carthaginian war cries. The fog suddenly parts as thousands of Carthaginian light infantry charge down the steep slopes, hurling javelins into the dense mass of Romans below. At the exact same moment, the Spanish and African heavy infantry step out of the mist at the eastern exit, locking their shields and drawing their short swords. And behind the Romans, the Gallic cavalry charges into the rear guard, sealing the trap. The psychological shock is absolute. The Romans are caught in total surprise. They are packed tightly together on the narrow shoreline, their heavy shields facing forward, completely unprepared for an attack from above and behind. The manipular formation, their greatest tactical advantage, is instantly useless. There is no room to maneuver. There is no room to deploy the checkerboard lines. The Romans are crushed together like sardines in a tin. The Carthaginian troops on the hills have the ultimate advantage of elevation. They are throwing heavy stones, hurling javelins, and firing arrows down into the packed Roman ranks. The Romans try to raise their shields to protect against the rain of missiles, but the angle is too steep. The javelins punch through the wood and leather, pinning arms to sides, piercing helmets, shattering collarbones. The Roman legionaries try to form a defensive line, but the terrain is too narrow. They are pushed backward, step by step, away from the hills, directly into the cold, dark water of Lake Trasimene. The slaughter is mechanical, brutal, and entirely one-sided. The Carthaginian heavy infantry, waiting at the exit, do not even need to charge. They simply stand in a solid wall of bronze and iron and let the panicked Romans crash against them. When the Romans try to fight back, the Carthaginians use their short swords to stab upward into the gaps of the Roman armor, while the light infantry on the hills continue to rain death from above. The water at the edge of the lake begins to turn black. It is not just mud. It is a thick, swirling mixture of blood, sweat, and the spilled entrails of dying men. The screams of the wounded echo off the steep hills, magnified by the fog, creating a claustrophobic chamber of pure terror. Men slip in the bloody mud and drown in the shallow water, weighed down by their heavy armor. The Roman command structure completely collapses. The tribunes are cut down before they can even issue orders. The centurions are blinded by the fog and the blood in their eyes. It is a total rout. We are about to look at the final, brutal hours of the battle and the shocking aftermath that changed the course of the war. If you want to see more videos on how geography dictates the fate of empires, make sure to like this video right now and let us know in the comments which historical battle we should dissect next. As the morning wears on, the sun finally begins to exert its power. The air temperature rises, and slowly the wind begins to shift. This is the moment of truth. The wind shifts from the east, blowing directly across the lake. But it does not clear the battlefield. Just as Hannibal predicted the night before, the shifting wind catches the massive cloud of fog and wood smoke, and it drives it directly into the faces of the Romans. The Carthaginian troops, positioned upwind on the hills, look down through thinning, clear air. They can see their targets perfectly. The Romans, marching into the wind, are hit by a blinding, stinging wall of thick white smoke. They cannot see the enemy. They cannot see their officers. They cannot even see the men standing shoulder to shoulder with them. They are fighting completely blind, swinging their swords at empty air, tripping over the dead, slipping in the gore. In the center of this absolute chaos, Gaius Flaminius is fighting like a madman. He is a big man, heavily decorated, wearing the crest of a consul. He refuses to flee. He rallies a small group of his personal guard and fights his way toward the Carthaginian line, desperately trying to find a gap, trying to break the trap. He spots a group of Gallic warriors and charges them. For a few minutes, the Roman consul fights with terrifying strength, his sword flashing in the dim light. But he is surrounded. A Gallic cavalryman, recognizing the high crest on his helmet, rides him down. The horse slams into Flaminius, knocking him to the bloody mud. Before he can rise, a spear takes him in the chest. The consul of Rome dies in the shallow water of Lake Trasimene, his body trampled into the muck. When the Romans see their consul fall, the last remnants of their morale shatter. The resistance collapses entirely. Those who are not killed outright throw down their weapons and surrender. But the Carthaginian troops, fueled by years of hatred and the adrenaline of a perfect ambush, are in no mood to take prisoners. The killing continues until the sun is high in the sky and the fog finally burns away, revealing a landscape of absolute horror. The battlefield is a carpet of broken bodies. The water of the lake is thick with corpses. The Carthaginian soldiers walk among the dead, checking for survivors, finishing off those who still twitch. They strip the bodies of iron, bronze, and leather. They pile the Roman shields into massive heaps. Hannibal rides through the carnage, his face unreadable. He has achieved the impossible. He has broken the back of the Roman military machine. But as he looks out over the lake, the water is still red. The crows are already gathering in the sky, circling the narrow pass. The smell of copper and voided bowels hangs thick in the morning air. It is the smell of total annihilation. When the Carthaginians finally call a halt, the scale of the destruction is staggering. 15,000 Roman soldiers lie dead. 10,000 manage to escape through the hills, wandering blindly in the aftermath, only to be hunted down by Carthaginian cavalry patrols over the next few days. Hannibal's losses are minimal. He has destroyed an entire Roman army in a single morning at a fraction of the cost. The Roman Republic is brought to the absolute brink of collapse. When the news reaches Rome, the city goes into deep mourning. The women wander the streets in torn clothes, crying for their husbands, their sons, their brothers. The Senate is paralyzed. They realize, with terrifying clarity, that they cannot beat Hannibal in a pitched battle. They cannot outfight him. They cannot outmarch him. They are forced to adopt the delaying tactics of Quintus Fabius Maximus, avoiding open combat with Hannibal for years, bleeding him slowly through attrition. The Battle of Lake Trasimene remains one of the largest and most successful ambushes in military history. But when we look back at this event, there are three critical takeaways that extend far beyond the ancient world. The first takeaway is the ultimate truth of tactical warfare. The environment is the ultimate weapon. Hannibal did not just defeat the Roman army. He used the lake, the hills, the narrow pass, the fog, and the wind to do the killing for him. He understood that terrain is not just a backdrop for a battle. It is an active participant. If you can weaponize the geography, you can multiply your force tenfold. The second takeaway is a warning about the danger of absolute certainty. Arrogance blinds you much faster than any fog. Gaius Flaminius was a brave man, but his fatal flaw was his impatience. He believed so deeply in his own aggressive strategy that he ignored the warnings of his scouts. He ignored the advice of the Senate. He marched his men into a known geographical bottleneck without sending out proper cavalry screens to check the hills. He let his ego override his tactical caution. In any high-stakes endeavor, whether it is leading an army, running a business, or making a life decision, the moment you believe you cannot be surprised is the moment you are walking into a trap. And the final takeaway is the most haunting. It is the silence that follows the storm. Polybius, the great Greek historian who chronicled the rise of Rome, visited the site of the battle years later. He wrote about the sheer scale of the destruction, but he also noted something deeply unsettling about the aftermath. He described how the local inhabitants, years after the battle, would still find rusted weapons and broken armor washing up on the shores of the lake. The land itself remembered the slaughter. The blood had soaked so deeply into the mud that the grass grew darker, thicker, and stranger in that narrow pass. The battle was over in a few hours, but the physical and psychological scar it left on the landscape and on the Roman psyche lasted for generations. It is a chilling reminder that while history books focus on the grand strategies and the brilliant generals, the true cost of war is paid in the mud, in the fog, and in the silent, unmarked graves of the men who simply could not see what was coming. If you were in command of the Roman vanguard and the fog suddenly parted to reveal a solid wall of enemy cavalry blocking your path, what is the very first order you give your men? Let me know your tactical decision in the comments below. Stay curious, stay vigilant, and I will see you in the next one.